Hillary Rodham Clinton, let's begin where the book begins, Chapter 1, Team of Rivals. And you draw an analogy between your role as a New York senator and a former senator, William Henry Seward, who served in the Lincoln administration. My question is, when you went into the job of Secretary of State, did you expect it to be a team of rivals when it came to policy debates and competitive agendas?
Well, Steve, I expected there would be vigorous debate, but I say in the book, I believe from both my understanding of history and my first-hand look at how presidents operate, that at the end of the day, these decisions are for a president to make. So what I wanted to do was to bring my experience and my thoughts about what we should be doing and how we should do them, put it on the table, argue vigorously, but then respect the president's final deliberation that led to his decision.
You offered a memo to the president. I know you can't give any of the details, but some advice. What advice would you give this president or any president when it comes to dealing with foreign policy?
First of all, I believe that America is the indispensable nation. I believe that we cannot go around solving all the problems in the world, but there are no big problems that can be solved without us. Our leadership is absolutely essential for the kind of country we want and the kind of world we hope to see. So you go into the office with a very sober understanding of the responsibility. Yes, there are challenges, and we see them quite vividly on the front pages today, but there are also great opportunities. Our values are our best resource. That's who we are, that's in our DNA, and we have an opportunity to convey that to the rest of the world, particularly the majority of the world's population in many places, which is under 30. So I want any president to believe in America's indispensability, really believe in America's leadership and its essential role, and have a good team around him or her to help make those difficult calls, make the hard choices.
There are a couple of issues in the book I want to focus on. In one of the chapters, you deal with a middle class that's going to expand, Brazil, China, India, and what that means for the resources of the world. So explain what your reference is to that.
Well, in the book, I write about the challenges we face, and of course, first among those is climate change and what that will mean, but also the global prosperity that we in the United States have helped to build. We've helped to create those middle classes. It's been, our security assurances in Asia. It's been our example of free markets for free people and making sure that consumers could get better goods and that they could develop a middle class. And so, for my perspective, trying to make sure that we in the United States understand that we want people in other countries to be more successful. We want them to be lifted out of poverty. It's not only a human rights issue, it's not only a security issue, which indeed it is, it's an economic opportunity. The more people who have a higher standard of living, the more likely they are to believe in democracy, to believe in the values of freedom and opportunity that we exemplify, and to want to buy the kinds of high-value goods and services that the United States excels in.
112 nations, and I think you point out that 87 days on an airplane?
We spent a lot of time, months actually, on the airplane going from place to place. And I can't say enough, and I do in the book, about what a great honor it is to get on that plane, labeled the United States of America, land somewhere, feeling that I'm carrying with me not just myself and my staff and the press who travel with the Secretary of State, but the values, the symbolism of the United States. So we had fun on the plane. You had to have some fun because it was a lot of long hours in the air. We watched a lot of movies. We had a lot of humorous episodes where we would make fun of each other. We dealt with crises long distance because we were always connected with Washington or our embassies. So even though it was a lot of time in the air, we were able to get the most out of it.
Well, share one of those stories because there are a number in the book. What was the funniest moment?
There were a lot of them, but one that I write about, which I don't know if anybody can really picture, but if you knew what Richard Holbrooke looked like, the fact that he, an experienced diplomat who had traveled the world so many times over, been in conflict zones, negotiated peace, would change into what he called his sleeping suit, which looked literally like the kind of footy pajamas that you put on little kids. And it was a bright, bright yellow, and it just shocked everybody on the plane. And he did it with great good humor. So he gave us something to laugh about. But also, we all started thinking, this man has actually flown and traveled more miles than probably all of us put together. And this is what he thinks he has to sleep in to keep himself recharged.
He made a reference, and you write about the situation in Iraq and how to end a war, that it doesn't end without dialogue.
That's right.
Explain what his advice to you was on that and how you would apply that to Iraq today.
Well, the chapter that I include about what happened in Pakistan and Afghanistan when I was there is called To End a War, which is the title of Richard's memoir about ending the war in the Balkans. And he taught me a lot. I had known him for a long time, so I had been in touch with him when he was ambassador to Germany, when he went to the UN, and we had been kind of colleagues, if you will, even before he became my special envoy for Afghanistan and Pakistan. And he stressed continually that getting to the point where you can make peace is never easy, because you don't make peace with your friends. You make it with people who are your adversaries, who have killed those you care about, your own people, or those who you are trying to protect. And it's a psychological drama. You have to get into the heads of those on the other side, because you have to change their calculation enough to get them to the table. You know, I talk about what we did in Iran. We had to put a lot of economic pressure to try to get them to the table, and we'll see what happens, but that has to be the first step. And I write about what we did in Afghanistan and Pakistan, trying to get the Taliban to the table for a comprehensive discussion with the government of Afghanistan. Well, in Iraq today, I think what we have to understand is that it is primarily a political problem that has to be addressed. The ascension of the Sunni extremists, the so-called ISIS group, is taking advantage of the breakdown in political dialogue and the total lack of trust between the Maliki government, the Sunni leaders, and the Kurdish leaders. I had been warning about this, as had many others, for a long time, because when President Bush made the decision with Maliki that we would withdraw our troops at the end of 2011, unless we reached an agreement for them to stay under certain conditions, I worked to try to figure out if there was such an agreement, and the State Department was an active participant in those conversations. But at the same time, we were constantly stressing Maliki has to be more inclusive. He can't turn his back on the Sunni areas. He has to continue to support the men who came into what was called the Sunni awakening that then General Petraeus helped to broker, so that the Sunnis began actually fighting with Americans and with Shiite Iraqis against al-Qaeda in Iraq. It was our understanding that Maliki understood the importance of that and would maintain it. But unfortunately, it was impossible to reach an agreement with him, so our troops left. They could not stay because they didn't have the protections that we required. And then he immediately began to go after Sunni leaders. He would postpone and fail to come up with the agreement about the allocation of oil revenues, something the Kurds were rightly concerned about. And he would unfortunately set up a sectarian government that couldn't maintain the loyalty of great parts of Iraq, and there was a vacuum, and the ISIS group went into it.
One other note about Richard Holbrooke, because you write about him, a veteran diplomat. He was in your office when he literally collapsed. What happened?
Oh, it was a terrible moment. Richard and I had been working, as I recount in the book, to open a line of communication with Mullah Omar, the head of the Afghan Taliban. And we had good partners in Europe who were working with us on that as well. And we were setting up a meeting with a contact to verify that he was a representative authorized by Mullah Omar. So there was a lot of potential in the moment that we were exploring. And he and I were having a scheduled meeting on early on a morning after a lot of this